All right, everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the ATRL Charts podcast.
Thanks for tuning in. This is you, Mitch, from ATRL, and we have a lot to talk about today.
I am Alexander A.O. From ATRL, and we've got a few panelists missing, but that seems to be the norm over the last few episodes, actually over all of our episodes. So we're going to look for that one elusive episode where we get everybody together, and it's a big, fun, 4-person podcast. That day will come. I don't know when. I'm not going to make promises because there'll be. Yes, it'll be a surprise podcast with all 4 of us. It's going to be great. And with that in mind, let's get started. The top story of the day is the new Hot 100. Cheerleader spending a 6th week at the top spot, barely taking the number 1 over Can't Feel My Face, despite Can't Feel My Face leading in both sales and airplay. It's lagged behind on streaming, and that's the difference this week.
Yeah, I wasn't that surprised when I found out that Cheerleader stayed at number 1 for 6 weeks. Because as we just discussed as we discussed with the last podcast, the sales actually were very, very close. And then the only thing that Omi led in was streaming, so by default that really kept them ahead. And looking at today's numbers, Omi is ahead in streaming by a few million points. So it looks like the video or whatever streaming is hurting Can't Feel My Face's chances to stay at number 1 longer. I mean, don't get us wrong, it's a huge hit, but it's just very, very very interesting to see how this song is just doing in the streaming department with the video. It's, for some reason, I don't think it just has that much of a replay value. So I think Omi should stand ahead for the fact that he has a very fun, watchable video, and it's been very, very accepted by the public.
And the video for Can't Feel My Face is very unimpressive. If you haven't watched it, I recommend you do, just so that you know what we're talking about. It's very kind of conservative, not very remarkable in any sense of the word, and just generally not something that you want to watch over and over again, like you said. And so it doesn't surprise anyone, I think, that it's 2 million behind in streaming. And that's really the only reason why it's behind. Because it's ahead in sales, a very slim lead, up by 4,000 copies, but it is ahead. And it's ahead by around 10 million on overall audience, on Nielsen overall audience. So it's had the chance to be number 1 for the past several weeks, and it would have had 3-4 weeks at number 1 by now already had the streaming been stronger, had the video been better. Because you can't complain about the on-demand streaming because it's been number 1 on Spotify for 6 weeks and counting.
Right.
So The Weeknd is going to have a chance. He still has got a chance to get 2 to 4 more weeks at number 1 with Can't Feel My Face. He's got the VMA performance coming up. He's got a very healthy sales lead at the moment, up by 40% over Cheerleader. Although Cheerleaders have separate versions, still that's a very healthy lead. If you can maintain that for the week, he should get that number 1 back.
Yeah, I agree. I'm almost sure he's going to get back to number 1. And if you guys don't know already, his album Beauty Behind the Madness is scheduled to be released this Friday. And as we've seen with major releases, album releases tend to give a nice popularity boost to songs that are already hits. So this song could benefit from the album being released, and it could very well gain in sales just by that. So that's one thing to look out for as well. We've seen that with with 1989, Blank Space got a huge first week. Shake It Off got somewhat of an increase in sales as well. Not saying 1989 is Beauty Behind the Madness, but I'm just doing a comparison so you guys can kind of figure out what we're talking about. But as you said, Alex, the VMAs are this Sunday. That can definitely fuel the song to higher heights. But with sales being as they are, I mean, I don't know how much of a boost these songs are going to get. So I think this is the first major award show that we will actually see how much have digital sales actually declined. Because I know a few years ago, Katy performed Roar at the VMAs, and she increased by over 25%. From 392,000 to 448,000, which that was huge. That was very huge. And also that was another example of just example of songs just getting digital air or digital boosts from the VMAs. But I think this year will be a very interesting thing to watch to see what songs will get the biggest boost, and if they do, how much they're going to increase. So that'll be interesting. Maybe something we'll talk about next week or the week after.
Yeah, and I don't think you can guarantee a boost for Can't Feel My Face at all. Maybe it only gets like some 5% boost that doesn't, totally propel the song. And you've also got Complete My Album because the album's coming out.
Exactly.
So that could like totally wipe out any effect that the VMAs are going to have. So bottom line is, it's kind of the number one's kind of in flux for the weekend if he's going to rely on sales. He's got to extend that airplay advantage if he wants to go number one. Right now, Can't Feel My Face gained almost 3 million today, and Cheerleader declined by 500,000. So if that gap can widen, and it's at 10 million right now, if that gap can widen, then the weekend's chances at getting number one again will increase. But obviously, Cheerleader still ahead on overall streaming. That's a pretty big lead, almost 2 million. So we'll have to see if the weekend can pick it up. I do think he'll get 2 to 4 more weeks at number one and match his peak. And speaking of matching peaks, Selena Gomez's Good For You, featuring A$AP Rocky, is up 4 spots to number 6 this week, and that matches its peak.
Yeah, this is, her third song. Her first was Come and Get It back in 2013. Then The Heart Was What It Wants, which was last fall. And now with Good For You being her third song to peak at number 6 with her biggest peak to date. The good thing about this song, and I know some of the Selenators, I think that's what you call them, they were worried that, oh my god, it peaked at number 6, it's the end. Well, the thing with this song is that it hasn't peaked in popularity yet. With the previous 2 singles, when they peaked at number 6, they peaked at number 6 and in popularity within sales, streams, and airplay. With this song, it's still growing in airplay. The label just released the explicit version to the song a few days ago, and they also released a second video to the song, which is pretty much the same video but with A$AP Rocky spliced into the video. So that's an extra outlet for streams, which you kind of have to keep in mind. So I don't think number 6 will be the peak for this song. I think this will be her first song to actually go top 5, which will be a huge accomplishment for Selena and for her team. And it's a good song and she deserves it. I'm happy for her, I'm happy for her fans, and I can confidently say that this song won't peak at number 6 like a lot of people are speculating. But I'm just, congratulations to her. Great achievement. Absolutely.
And I don't think people realize, but this is the fastest growing song on pop radio right now by a large margin. On all stations pop, the bullet for Good For You is 2,465, which is a very large bullet. That's very good. And in second place, with only 1,609, is Locked Away, which is a number one contender in its own right, but not increasing nearly as fast as Good For You right now. So it's very quickly growing on pop radio. Very impressive Spotify numbers. I don't think Selena's ever had a song with this much consistency on Spotify. It's been 5 and 6 for the past month, or two. Been in the top 10 since June, really, since it came out, really. It's been in that Spotify top 10, racking up on-demand streams. And although the video is weak, and we had a case of this with The Weeknd, the video is weak with Selena as well. She's got a second video, so we'll see how that plays out. And it might not matter if she hits number 1 on pop radio like it's looking like she will, and if she goes a little bit higher on Spotify, she could peak at number 4. That's realistic. This is definitely her biggest hit to date. A very solid hit.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. And this will be huge for her going into the fall with the album coming out later this fall. I don't know if the label has any other plans to release a second single or a second link single, but I think the song will definitely have longevity even after its peak. Like you said, because she's doing really good Spotify numbers, and this is pretty much one of her first songs to actually do very well on Spotify. And as we've seen, I think we talked about, you brought up a really good point on the last podcast, that streaming usually keeps songs around on the chart well after they peak, because we've seen that with Sugar. We've seen that with Thinking Out Loud, and with this song, with the numbers that it's pulling on Spotify, I think it could follow in that track of just having a very excellent longevity. Excuse me, longevity after it peaks, wherever it peaks in the Hot 100's top 10.
So a lot of momentum for Selena heading into her album release. Speaking of album releases, Rihanna has been rumored to be releasing one for a while. It's been over 1,000 days, as some gleeful threads on ATRL have pointed out recently. So has not releasing the album hurt Rihanna, or will she come back and everything will be fine in the end?
Overall, I think everything will be fine for her at the end. I mean, we all make fun of her and whatever she's doing. She's been apparently taking vacations and clearly, for lack of a better term, not giving a damn, as our fans are saying. I mean, we've seen all of the avatars with the hashtag #PrayForR8, and it's funny. I laugh every time I see one. But getting back on topic, to be honest, I don't think this is gonna affect her in a major way. Some people are expecting that she's going to completely just flop with their 8th album. She's Rihanna. I don't see her flopping. I mean, she's a very strong radio artist, and for whatever you see it for, she has really good sales. Now, I don't know how well her sales are going to do now that we're in a slump of digital decline, but I do know, just going by previous history, that there's no possible way that this album or whatever she's releasing next is going to completely flop. Like, I'm not seeing the Spirit Indestructible numbers or Emotion by Carly Rae Jepsen numbers like some people are so gleefully trolling about. It's like, no, that's not happening with Rihanna. But what I do think is that if she comes back, or whenever she comes back with the full lined up project, I'm pretty sure her and her team are going to be ready and fitting in with the trends, not necessarily the musical trends, but just being in gear for how music is going to be received by the general public, because you can't be away for too long, but you don't want to rush and come back with something half-assed, because you don't want to completely just drive your fans away or drive the general public away. So I think she's trying to go for that critical acclaim and try to really get in good with the with the critics, because I'm not really familiar. I'm not too much familiar with her albums on Metacritic, but I know that one of her albums, I think it was either Loud or Rated R, where she got a very high rating, but that was years ago. So I think she's trying to go back to the place where, let me make great music. Let me make great music that my fans appreciate, but also the critics appreciate. So I think it's a mix, but I don't think waiting too long, or waiting 3 years now, is gonna hurt her that much. But I think she realizes that time is ticking. So at the very worst, I mean, we could get a typical November release from her, because in the past she's normally released around Black Friday. So if that's something that she decides to do this year, it wouldn't surprise me much, because it'll be a typical Rihanna release. So that means we may get a lead single soon. I don't know.
and there's the trade-off here, is that you either take 9-10 months and try to put a bunch of songs together all at once and make an album, and we don't know if her past albums were half-assed, and they might not have been, because some of them have got some good songs, and they're pretty good albums, I think, but who knows, they might not have been the best you could do. And so taking over 1,000 days, as people have pointed out on ATRL, to release an album might not necessarily be a bad thing for her music. She might have better lyrics in her songs. She could have more refined production. She might work with more people, maybe get a better defined sound. However, with the 3 singles she's put out, haven't been cohesive at all. 4 or 5 seconds, Bitch Better Have My Money, American Oxygen, don't sound alike at all. So maybe we don't get a cohesive album. But on the contrary, perhaps those are just kind of buzz singles. I don't like using that term, but I will. Because 4 or 5 seconds and Bitch Better Have My Money, they were hits, so I'm not saying they're flops by saying buzz singles. But maybe they were just meant to tide the public over, and the album's going to sound completely different. We can just speculate at this point. We've got no hints, we've got no leads as to how the album's going to sound. and we can't use the singles because it could just be a completely different direction than the singles. So
Yeah.
it'll be fascinating to see where she goes with this. And I guess hopefully her fans will be pleased. They've been waiting, not very patiently, but they've been waiting a while.
Yeah, a very long time, and they'll still stick with her. I mean, they're not going anywhere. If they can survive the Chris Brown incident and them getting back together, splitting up, getting back together, I'm pretty sure they can hold off for another few months before she releases an album. I don't think she's going to wait any much longer than another 6 months. I mean, it'll be ridiculous at that point. And I'm just trying to be optimistic here. I don't want to be very like, oh no, she's gonna pull Adele and not release until God knows when. No, I think Rihanna is really going to release soon. And I hate using that word because soon normally doesn't mean soon, but in this sense and the way I say it, I think soon means within the next 3 to 6 months. So I'm crossing my fingers for Rihanna and her team.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Alright, for our next segment, we'll talk about which 2015 hit songs are going to be classics. Maybe you've got obvious ones in your mind, like, say, Uptown Funk. But are there a few other songs that could possibly become classics in the future that were hits this year?
Well, definitely Uptown Funk. It's one of those songs that everyone knows, from the young to the old. So, and as we talked about before, it's like when you can touch on many generations, that's how you get your songs to have longevity, and not necessarily speaking about the Hot 100, but just longevity throughout life in general. Another hit which sticks out to me, I believe Thinking Out Loud will become a classic, because it's very just it's not necessarily something that's special, but I think a lot of people connected with the song. At work, this woman who sits next to me, Thinking Out Loud is her ringtone and her text message tone for her boyfriend, which I hear about twice an hour. So I've heard that song pretty much all year, not just on the radio, but just by virtue of me sitting next to my coworker. I hear that every hour. But besides all that, I think it just has that sound that it just transcends through years and through decades, and the fact that it's still pretty much a very solid hit at this point, almost 40-50 weeks on the Hot 100. It's just proven the fact that it's going to stick around for a very long time. And I think Ed Sheeran just hit it home with that simple, just melodic, just very loving, touching ballad, if you will. Kind of similar to Someone Like You, but not necessarily to that magnitude, but maybe in that, I guess, in that realm of songs or ballads that'll be remembered for the decade. I think Thinking Out Loud will definitely be one of those songs. So definitely Thinking Out Loud for me. I can't really think of anything else that sticks out to me, because honestly 2015 has kind of been all over the place in terms of hits, and I've watched the charts for a very long time this year, but I cannot think of any songs that will stick out as classics to me, except for the two that we just mentioned, or the one that you mentioned, Uptown Funk, and the one I just talked about, Thinking Out Loud. So maybe that'll change for me later this year, but nothing really sticks out to me at the moment.
And I gotta agree. Thinking Out Loud has this polished. It's polished enough not to be cheesy, and it's refined enough. It has this very relaxed, casual vibe, but at the same time, it's got a great message. It's very uplifting. It's not sad. That's important, because there aren't many sad songs that are classics, at least this decade.
Right.
And it's just got this. It does have the vibe of a classic, in my opinion. And Uptown Funk is a classic for a totally different reason. That's a pump-up song right there.
Right.
I'm hearing that in baseball parks, basketball arenas. It's great for sports, great for parties, great for hangouts. Thinking Out Loud's like totally the opposite of that. It's very casual, very chill. So two different classics.
Right.
And it's interesting to see that juxtaposition. And I think maybe some other fringe contenders for being a classic, I don't know, possibly See You Again, obviously a tribute to Paul Walker, so perhaps that will help in terms of the memories that it brings with it into the future. But other than that, I don't think that... I mean, I agree with you. There's nothing that's a surefire classic other than those two, and See You Again is kind of a fringe classic. I would not be sure whether in a few years you'd look back on See You Again and say, well, that was a classic. Because you could look back at some other long-running number ones and argue that they weren't classics. Like,
very true.
I would actually make the argument that a song like Party Rock Anthem is not very remembered today. Or, like, that's a very dated sound. It doesn't feel like a classic to me.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, going along with the whole, like, long-running number one thing, I mean, I love the song. The Boy's Mind spent 13 weeks at number one back in 98. It was actually the song of the summer in 98. But I don't think it's necessarily a classic. It's remembered on some levels, but I don't think it's a classic. So maybe See You Again will be remembered on some level, but classic, it's either too early to tell or no. It's just gonna be one of those things where everyone knows it now, and people may think about it later, you know, going back and reminiscing, thinking about songs that were hits in 2015. But I don't think it'll have that I guess that it factor that makes it a hit, or not a hit, a classic.
Well, that just about sums it up for that segment. I don't know. I really can't think of any other songs that would be classics. Kind of been devoid of that 2015. But anyways, next thing we'll talk about is Fall Out Boy's era so far, which clearly has been flying under the radar. Somehow, Uma Thurman has managed to get, basically tomorrow it'll be top 10 on pop radio.
Impressive, very, very impressive, considering that they're not pop radio staples like the main pop girls are. I'm just very impressed at the fact that, one, that song is going top 10 on pop radio, and two, that it had so much longevity climbing up the charts, because we all know Fall Out Boy for their longevity. Like, if we look at their previous single, Centuries, it was released last fall, but it didn't hit top 10 until sometime earlier this year. Same thing with Uma Thurman. It was released sometime early mid 2015, but it's still climbing on the charts. And I think it just goes back to what we were talking about weeks ago in other podcasts, where you have these songs that start off on one format and then they cross over to pop. But with Uma Thurman, I don't think it got much support from its home format. I don't think. Yeah.
42 on alternative.
Which is shocking. I mean, a song like that I thought would just smash on that format, but it seems that pop and adult pop are treating better than their home format, which is like, wow. But hey, it's a win for Fall Out Boy. But yeah, I think they always fly under the radar. To me, they're underrated. I think they bring a very, very unique sound to pop, or to radio in general, or, you know, things that you're typically not used to hearing on pop radio. So I think it's a refreshing to hear like a song like Uma Thurman being played in the midst of like pure pop, like a Style or Bad Blood, or in the midst of R&B or urban pop crossovers like Trap Queen, Watch Me, or songs like that. So I think they just bring another diverse spin with their music to pop radio, and I think that's what's helping keeping them in rotation. Because if you think about it, you really don't have that many grunge type bands that are doing successful on pop radio these days, except Fall Out Boy.
And they've got a very distinct sound, and really they've got nothing going for them in terms of if they're going to try to get a top 10 hit on Billboard.
Right.
They've got nothing going for them. They're a rock influenced band, and the rock format's kind of dying out.
Yeah.
Sorry to say that for rock fans, but it is. The top songs on active rock and rock are down to 1 million AI, and that's very small.
Yeah.
So you've got a genre that's dying out, and then you've got the fact that Fall Out Boy also hadn't been around since My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark. That was years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They took 2014 off. They decided that they wouldn't put out a single, wouldn't put out an album, and they didn't. And yet they came back this year with 2 singles that initially didn't look very promising, but turned out to have this very steady, this slow, steady climb up both the sales and radio charts, ending up with high peaks. And it's amazing to me that they've had 2 pop radio top 10s. I would have never guessed that. And it's fascinating to see how unnoticed it goes by most of the public.
Yeah, and I think that just goes back to them just being under the radar and not really promoting to a mainstream audience. I think they're keeping their focus on targeting their main fans, because as I remember, they performed at the Billboard Awards earlier this year with, surprisingly enough, Wiz Khalifa, and they performed Uma Thurman back then. But that was one of their first major performances in a while. And Billboard Awards, they attract not only your pop mainstream audiences, but you have a mix of people who listen to alternative that may tune in, people who listen to R&B that may tune in. So they were exposed to a larger audience more than what they're normally used to being exposed to or feeding themselves to. So I think that just goes into the lines of them just being low key and them wanting to be low key, because I don't think they were ever actually looking for like a huge breakout success. I mean, they've had big singles or singles that have done tremendously well, but a lot of that just happens to be like word of mouth or things that just cross over from their home format over to pop radio or adult pop radio. So I think they're just very underrated, and they're gonna be very under the radar for a long time. And if they really want to just make a very, very pop rock song, they could do that and just smash all day. But I think they're comfortable with their sound, and it seems to be working for them, and I'm happy for them.
Yeah, very, very successful era for them. Absolutely. The album, I think, went number 1 on the Billboard 200 too, if I'm not mistaken, too.
Yeah, you're right.
So, good job by them. And now we're going to go to another segment. With the recent hits, well, not hits. There's been one bona fide hit from a girl group recently. Fifth Harmony's Worth It. But a lot of people are optimistic about Little Mix's Black Magic. So I think it's the right time. A lot of people are going to ask this question. But are girl groups coming back? We haven't seen girl groups be popular in the U.S. since the late 90s. And except for a few songs in the mid-2000s cracking the top 10 on the Hot 100, there hasn't really been an extended amount of popularity for girl groups in the United States. So, is 2015 the launch pad for groups like Fifth Harmony and Little Mix? Or is this just another one of those spurts, and in 2016, 2017, we'll return to having pop music without girl groups?
Yeah, very, very interesting thought, very interesting question. On some level, I do believe that Fifth Harmony has rekindled an interest in girl groups these days. In the 2000s, we had, part of the Spice Girls era coming in, and then we had Destiny's Child, who pretty much were very, very popular, last decade from the 2000s up until 2005, which when they officially disbanded. Then you had the Pussycat Dolls, who ironically came out the same year as Destiny's Child was pretty much exiting out. And they had fairly successful hits and albums. Like you had Don't Ya, you had Stick With You, Buttons. Then they had another follow-up album that did well, but not as well as the previous. So I guess there was a cycle or a drought between 2008 and now, because we had Danity Kane, which was an offspring of Puff Daddy, P Diddy, Sean Combs, whatever you want to call him.
Wasn't he called like Swag for like a week? There was like, wasn't there one time when he was called Swag?
Honestly, he could have been called that, and I didn't even pick it up because he's had so many names. I just call him Diddy. It's easier for me to remember, and I just know him by Diddy. But Danity Kane was an offspring from from Diddy, from the show. I forget the name of the reality show, but they were mildly successful. They had 2 errors, and then they just faded away. And then Pussycat Dolls kind of just disbanded, faded away, or whatever after a few years together. So with girl groups, it's all about the chemistry. Honestly, I think that's why a girl group like Destiny's Child was able to really survive. I mean, they had their controversy or share of it way back when, but when they finally got the final 3 members together, which were Beyonce, Kelly, and Michelle, they had successful errors, and they were able to stick together because of their chemistry. Now, with groups like Danity Kane, Fifth Harmony, you see a lot of egotism, a lot of, oh, I want to be in the front, I want to sing lead, I want to do this, I want to do that. And people pick up on that, and it's something that may be a disconnect for people or a turn off for some people, because if you're not a well-oiled machine, no one's really going to be interested in you as a group. Now, if they go solo, that's a different story. But as far as Fifth Harmony breaking out with Worth It, and now Little Mix seems to be doing okay at the start. I'm looking at the pop chart right now, and they're number 25 on the published pop radio airplay chart. I haven't checked the iTunes chart yet, but I think Fifth Harmony kind of, I guess, rekindle interest or open doors on some levels to girl groups again. Now they're gonna have to follow up hard with their follow-up smashes. I mean, they have to put out another song or other songs that are gonna stick well with the general public, and I'm not sure what the next single is from Fifth Harmony is. I think it's rumored to be Reflection, which is the title track from their album that they just released this year. But they're going to have to follow up and come harder. They're going to have to, strike while the iron is hot, because the moment you have a hit, or the moment you have something that the GP is sticking to, you're going to have to stay on that. You can't fall away and fade back. So going on with Little Mix, they're going to have to be exposed. They're going to have to go out and push themselves. And I know they had a hit a couple years ago. I think Wings was on the chart for maybe a few weeks, but it wasn't as nearly as big as Fifth Harmony's hits that they just put out this year, like with Sledgehammer and Worth It. So I think, and I don't want to piss off anybody by saying this, but I think Little Mix should take advantage of what Fifth Harmony has done so far this year with, Worth It was a huge radio hit, top 5 on pop radio. So, you have to keep the momentum going and kind of assess the public and just go with that. I'm not completely saying girl groups are not in style or in season, but this is an opportune time to kind of jump on the train, if you will. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Well, here's my thing with the girl groups right now. Both Fifth Harmony and Little Mix were formed artificially on reality singing shows. On the respective editions of the X Factor, Fifth Harmony in America, and of course you had Little Mix in the UK. But they were formed that way, and you don't. I don't know for sure if the groups back in the 90s were formed that way. I don't have knowledge of that. But I think that could be a disadvantage for today's girl groups, in that there's a higher chance of someone splitting off the group and go solo. We just saw that with One Direction, a band formed on the X Factor. Yeah. And Zayn Malik decided to leave the group. So I think the same thing could definitely happen for Fifth Harmony and Little Mix.
Exactly.
Because they don't have this. Although the chemistry might be there, at the end of the day, it's an artificially formed group. So you have that risk. But I will say that Fifth Harmony has the best chance for a girl group that I've seen in a while. I didn't see it for GRL. I still don't really see it for Little Mix. But Fifth Harmony, because they've got this they lean rhythmic with their songs. Definitely an R&B influence. That will get them plays on rhythmic radio. And they'll be able to have a larger fan base because of that. If you're making pure bubblegum pop, like some of these girl groups, you have a much more limited audience, right? And you have a harder time cracking the mainstream because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Especially the part where you touched on about these groups being formed on reality shows. So, once the group gets quote unquote established, they tend to find themselves and they'll say, this is not a good fit for me. I mean, this was nice and all when we formed and we had hits, but I think I'm growing. And I think that's what happened with One Direction. Now they're down to 4 members.
Yes, 4.
Yeah, they're down to 4 members, and there are rumors that Louis, I don't know, sorry, that one of them may be leaving the group next year, and then there are rumors that they're splitting. So, when you have these groups that are formed by reality shows, you have to watch out for that. But as far as mainstream success for the time being, I think Little Mix could get a hit based on the fact that Fifth Harmony has had hits this year, so maybe those two can feed off of each other, if you will, in terms of success, like being, hits on radio and maybe hits, on iTunes and Spotify, because I believe Black Magic entered the top 50 on Spotify for a few days. I'm not sure if it's still there, but
Yep, it is.
It was there and it's still there. So that's an early sign of possible success. But long term, yeah, you're right. Who's to say they're gonna stay together forever? They're with each group, there's at least 1 or 2 members who have ego trips. Not saying all of them do, but most of them do, just by going on previous history and looking at these groups that are formed on reality shows or just something done, for contractual reasons. So, yeah, again, it'll be interesting to watch and see what happens.
Yeah, a good storyline to watch unfold this year, next year. And now it's time for our segment, Will It Go Top 10? We do this every podcast. We take around 5, 6, 7 songs, and we will basically talk about their futures, and, of course, whether they will go top 10 or not. This edition, the first song that we'll be covering is Stitches by Shawn Mendes.
Oh my. Yeah, I heard this song, and I like it. It's very Ed Sheeran like. And I thought it was Ed Sheeran when I first heard it on Spotify, and I had to open up the app, and I'm like, oh, this is that Shawn Mendes kid who just he was actually a Vine turned pop star now. I think it will go top 10. Probably sometime this fall. It sounds like a song that's more suited for the fall time. Chances probably 60 to 70%. I'm keeping it kind of low. I mean, maybe towards the 60% in, just because I don't know what the streaming numbers are looking like. I know it's doing well on Spotify, but I'm not sure how the video is doing. I've watched the video. It's nice. I don't know if it's going to have a lot of replay value for the general public, but I think it could be a top 10 hit, and he's yet to expose himself to a large audience. So I'm going to say yes, maybe sometime early fall.
Alright, I'm going to say 50%, 50-50 at this point. Could go higher. The sales have been obviously the best metric for Shawn Mendes to this point, as the song is currently top 10 on iTunes at number 9. That's a new peak, with 5 consecutive Dark Green updates. And also, the Spotify numbers haven't been too shabby at all, hanging around the number 30 spot. And on pop radio, it's climbing healthily as well, with up over 1,000. So things are looking good for Shawn Mendes to get his breakout hit. Now, granted, it could definitely stall out at any time, especially because he's not known to the mainstream public yet, and because he's not promoting the song on any major shows to this point. So it could stall out. That's why the 50-50, and not an 80 or 90% chance. But things are looking pretty good for this song, especially the recent sales increase that wasn't really triggered by any specific event. Now, I took a look at the YouTube views. If I just do a little eyeballing on the YouTube statistics graph, it's getting a little bit less than 500,000 views worldwide per day. So perhaps it's getting, I don't know, 200,000 a day from the US, which or 150,000 if it's mostly worldwide. I don't know, but either way, those aren't huge streaming numbers. That would only put him at around 1 million a week, or a little more than that. So that could possibly be the biggest weakness, actually, for Stitches.
Yeah.
But I think it's got a decent chance. It's been doing well so far. Early indications are good. And okay, so the next song that we'll talk about is "Love Myself" by Haley Steinfeld.
Yeah. I want to say yes, this will go top 10. But you kind of have to look at this without goggles, because this song is actually being pushed by Republic Records. This is her first single, and she is being featured as an On the Verge artist. And for those who don't know what that means, they're basically in contract with iHeartRadio or iHeartMedia for their song to get played on iHeart radio stations at least once an hour. So it's kind of like a radio deal for brand new artists, and this is what she has. And as a result of that, she is currently number 23 on pop radio on the published station, on the published chart. So I mean, for a brand new artist, you look at that and you say, oh my God, that's amazing. But you have to realize she's also being pushed by On the Verge. And the song is discounted as well on iTunes. So once all of those things end, then it'll be a better thing to judge whether it'll maintain its legs and be a top 10 hit. But the fact that it's already nearing the top 20 on iTunes is great. I mean, even though it's discounted, that's still pretty great for a brand new artist, essentially, who just has their very first single.
Now, yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna say it's 50-50. You know, the song it sounds uplifting and bright, but I did some research, and I don't think the song is really about what people actually think it's about. It's I'm not gonna say it. This is supposed to be PG-13, but you just look up the lyrics and you say, "Oh my God, this is about something else, perhaps." But I don't think that's really gonna matter to the general public. I think that can actually help the song do better on the charts. You know, because controversy sometimes makes songs do even better. But I'm gonna say 50-50 right now, because I want to say yes because I love the song, but I don't want to get too far in and say yes because, again, the song is being pushed, and it's not an organic rise on the charts. You have to kind of look at things once the On the Verge promotion goes away and the song is no longer discounted on iTunes. So 50-50.
Well, my gut instinct would be to say no. That would be my gut instinct. And here's the reason why. If you look at, new artists with their first single, especially ones that are trying to be pushed by a record label, their track records this year and last year have not been extremely good. The only artist I can think of that had an On the Verge deal within the last 2 years that got to a top 10 position on the Billboard Hot 100 with a solo song was Aloe Black with The Man, which reached top 10 on the Hot 100 and did very well on pop radio. But you look at recent artists, and that hasn't happened. So you have to wonder, is it going to be effective for Haley Steinfeld, who's known as an actress and not as a singer?
Right.
But then you look at the performance on, iTunes, which obviously is encouraging, even though it's discounted, because some songs that are discounted, and we've talked about this, they don't even go past the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, even though they're discounted. So 24 right now is encouraging, and can't take that away from the song. And obviously, the fact that it's rising well on radio, after presumably the deal is at least weakened now from the first week when it was being basically spammed, is still encouraging. So, at this point, I'm kind of on the fence, because like I said, my gut instinct is to say no, just based on the circumstance. But I think there's a good possibility that it could go top 10. The production is very familiar. We heard it on one last time, and now we're hearing it again. It's, even though it may have a double entendre in its lyrics, it still carries a very positive feeling to it. A very kind of just a very uplifting, pleasing kind of melodies.
Right.
So, if I had to give it a percent, I'd say around 40. But, like you said, we'll be able to make a much more accurate prediction once the discount ends and once the radio deal ends.
Exactly. Yeah, and the point. I'm sorry. To point out one thing. Another person who actually survived on the verge was Tove Lo. Habits. That was on
Oh
the
yeah,
song.
forgot about that one.
And it ended up being a #1 hit on radio, adult pop radio, and overall radio. Just wanted to point that out there.
Oh yeah, no, completely forgot.
But no, it's fine. But yeah, again, but you're right. The recent track record hasn't been that great. Like with Tori Kelly, Nobody Love was pushed very hard. Even when that was discounted, it stuck around in the 40s and 50s on iTunes. So, but this one, Love Myself, is nearing the top 20 on iTunes with the discount. So they could be encouraging, but we'll I guess talk about it in another podcast.
Yeah, and also you've had some other really bad failures. Kaya Stewart, wow, that's just honestly one of the worst chart runs I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. I do remember that one. That one was the definition of tragic.
Barely ever made the top 1,500 on iTunes.
Yeah,
and it was pushed for a while. And then last year, Katie Tiz, The Big Bang, that was a cover, and that totally failed. So On the Verge, definitely not guaranteeing success. But we'll take it from when the deal ends.
Yeah,
and we'll see how it goes. There's not really much else to say. Anyways, next song that we're going to talk about is Levels by Nick Jonas. That's the new single from him.
Levels, Nick Jonas. I heard a snippet of it. I haven't listened to the whole thing, but I'm going to say yes. I think this will probably be his somewhat, I guess, breakout era. I know Jealous was a huge hit for him, but I think this single will probably just kind of elevate him to new heights. I mean, he's going to be exposed a lot. He's going to be in a TV show. He's performing at the VMAs. Now I know that's off stage or the pre-show or something similar to that. So he could see a sales bump there. However, I'm going to keep my chances low. I'm going to say 50 to 60%. Just because I think he's going to be very, very pushed by radio, which we saw with Chains and Jealous. But I think if he does go top 10 at this point, it'll probably be somewhere in the lower rungs at the moment. I'm not really going to jump the gun and say it's going to be a huge top 10 hit, because we have not seen a huge top 10 hit from Nick Jonas just yet. I mean, Jealous sold about 2 million or more copies, which was great in this climate. But we just got to see how much this song is going to take life with radio. I see it just entered the pop songs chart either yesterday or today. So it's starting to take off there. And it had a really solid start on its first day at iTunes. So this is kind of an indicator on how it may do in the future. But right now I'm going to say 50 to 60% of yes.
And I think Nick Jonas obviously is going to get a lot of support from pop radio, and I never would have said that a year ago. But the way that Jealous and Chains performed, I definitely think that he's going to be well supported now with his future singles, with the exception of Good Thing, which I think did badly for a different reason than it not being, promoted and it being a Sage's Gemini song. Personally, I think that that kind of sound, that production style, is not really ringing with the public anymore, especially with Cheyenne also struggling to sell. So I think that's the reason Good Thing flopped. I don't think it had anything to do with Nick Jonas and his power on pop radio. But I think that he'll get good support. Looking at where it is on the iTunes chart, it's at number 64, so obviously it fell after it initially got released. We'll have to see if it stabilizes. I think it's too early to say definitively whether it will go top 10 or not, but I'll give it a a decent 30-40% chance. Just kind of an exploratory guess, because we haven't really seen much of how it's doing on streaming at all either. So very early, but I do think he could pick it back up. But obviously, it's always hard coming off a flop single, and I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't do as well as Jealous or Chains, and maybe peaks in the top 30 or top 20 of the Hot 100. That could totally happen.
You're right.
Alright, the next song that we'll talk about is a UK number one, actually. Marvin Gaye from Charlie Puth and Meghan Trainor. We've talked about it in podcasts before. Talked about it in the very first podcast. But now it's being featured on Will It Go Top 10.
Oh, this is one of those iffy songs. Marvin Gaye, it seems to be doing well on the sales front. It's top 10 on iTunes. It was actually removed and put back because the label is getting ready for the album release, which is in a few months. So you can pre-order the album on iTunes. It's called Nine. Oh God, I can't think of the name of it, but it's on iTunes. You can pre-order it. Again, I'm iffy with this one because it looks like it's falling in the same situation that Dear Future Husband did. It was doing great on sales, but radio for some reason was just saying, should we play it? Should we not play it? Should we play it? Should we not play it? And just looking at today's update, on the published chart, he got an 87 spin increase, but only 93,000 audience increase. And it's currently number 20 on pop radio. So you have to say to yourself, okay, this song has been around for a while, 68 days to be exact on pop radio. So you would think with the sales being great and with the streaming being okay, you would think radio would be jumping on this song, considering he just had a huge pop radio or a huge radio hit with See You Again, featured on with Wiz Khalifa not just months ago. So, I mean, I don't know. Right now, I'm going to say 50-50 yes and no, because it just looks very, very familiar to what Dear Future Husband did just earlier this year, and we saw that stall out in the top 15-20 region on the Hot 100. Yeah, although I do think it peaked it peaked at 14 earlier this year, but it was stuck in that 10-20 region or the 11-20 region. It's like radio didn't pick it up. So I just fear that if radio does pick it up, the sales will already peak. So, and it looks like his label is getting ready to service off another single soon. It's called One Call Away. So we don't know, but I'm going to say 50-50 at this point.
And you know, I gotta agree, and it puzzles me too. I mean, I guess maybe the answer lies in the call-out scores, which are very middle of the road, very average call-out scores. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't you wouldn't expect
right.
that a song with middle of the road call-out scores would go like top 10 or top 5, except if they're selling really well, like Fight Song, which obviously didn't go anywhere close to number one on pop radio. But because it is selling so amazingly well, and just hit number one on iTunes again last week, pop radio picked it up all the way to the point where it peaked in the 5 to 10 range. And that's not happening for Marvin Gaye. I don't care if it's number whatever it is on iTunes, if it's number 8, because it's not Fight Song. It's not selling that well.
Right.
And it's not resonating with the general public clearly, the way that, you know, other top 10 hits might be. So I do have to say 50-50, because the sales are encouraging. It's been very consistent in the top 10 of iTunes. I remember its rise was very unprovoked, you know. Mm-hmm. At that time, Megan really didn't have a single going, and I think that could have helped out. But now, I think radio has a conundrum here. Like I'm Gonna Lose You has been number one on call-outs for 2 weeks now. And that song is still struggling to do anything on pop radio.
Yep.
With an update today of only 16 spins, a bullet of less than 120, and only 4 million pop radio audience.
Goodness
so
gracious.
They've got they got to decide. Am I going to play like if you're in a pop radio program as mine? They're thinking, okay, well, are we going to play Like I'm Gonna Lose You because the public seems to really like it, and it seems like they do based on the callouts, which are better than any other song right now. Or are we going to play the song that's actually selling well on iTunes and streaming well on Spotify? It's a decision that you have to make. And,
yeah.
And right now it seems like some people are going with Marvin Gaye, and some people are going with Like I'm Gonna Lose You, and as a result, neither are going to be a big hit. So, at this point, maybe the 50% even looks a little bit too optimistic, because it actually went down on the Hot 100 last week. 2 spots to number 30.
Oh wow, I didn't even notice that.
So I'm not. Well, that was last week. I'm not sure what it did this week, but still. So maybe I could even say 40 or 30%, and that would be reasonable. But definitely disappointing from, the first podcast when we talked about its potential and talked about it becoming potentially a big hit and getting Megan's Era back on track and cementing Charlie as not a one-hit wonder. So a big drop down from them, for sure.
Yeah. And I think with Like I'm Gonna Lose You featuring John Legend, it's one of those things where then you have to ask yourself, are they waiting for a time to play it? Because right now we have a lot of huge songs that are still in rotation, like, Can't Feel My Face, Cheerleader, Lean On, pretty much the top 10 on the pop radio. So again, another issue is maybe pop programmers are saying, let's just wait until the summer's over and put these songs in rotation because maybe they suit the fall better. I've seen that happen before. Actually, if you go back 4 years, Someone Like You was kind of bubbling on the pop radio chart for a couple months, like July and August. But as soon as the MTV Awards hit and when fall came, it shot up like a bullet. So, I guess you kind of have to ask yourself that too, if radio's just going to wait until the fall to play these songs, because as we've seen, the numbers are great. People love hearing it on the radio, and it's being very receptive on iTunes. It's floating between the 35-40 region on iTunes, but the encouraging thing is that the sales have not plummeted. It has been stable for a while. So, well, I guess we'll see in a couple weeks. Maybe this will be another song or a pair of songs that we can revisit in a couple weeks to see, how they're doing. But you're right. It's a catch-22.
Yeah. All right. So sticky situation there, really. And the last song that we'll do in Will It Go Top 10 is one that has been much buzzed about lately. Hotline Bling by Drake.
Oh my goodness. I really love that song. I think it's the better song of the two, talking about back to back. I would love to see this go top 10. I really would. But as we've talked about, Drake hates videos for some apparent reason. He does not like videos. He just released one for Energy, which I actually didn't see, but based on people comments, people said the video was not up to par. And considering this is a single, Hotline Bling is a quote-unquote buzz single, which is really not getting any type of push outside of just word of mouth, I don't think he's really going to shoot a video for it. So that could definitely hurt his chances in going top 10. Now, we've seen songs go top 10 without videos, but those are songs that were either going viral at the time or songs that were already heavy on radio, like Trap Queen, which was a viral hit. It had a video, but it was a viral hit. And then we saw Can't Feel My Face go top 10, but that was also being fueled by the fact that it had so much airplay and so many sales attached to it. With Hotline Bling, it's just amazing how it's just holding on, it's just floating around without any type of promotion from him, just word of mouth on the streets, on the internet. At this point, I'm going to say it's a very low chance, so probably like 20-30%, maybe 40 if we want to be very optimistic, just because I don't see him shooting a video for this song. And if he does, it's probably going to be something very half-assed that he shot at a club or somewhere on tour, so the streaming numbers will be very, very weak because no one will want to watch anything like that. So I'm going to say very slim, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I think it's going to be a solid hit, because it's already selling so well. It's at number 16 on iTunes at the moment with apparently no radio. So, it's already an established hit in its own right.
You can get a top 10 without radio. We've seen that this year with Nasty Freestyle. But it's obviously a lot harder when you don't have that 50 or 100 or 150 million audience to back you up.
Right.
Now, Hotline Bling has overtaken Back to Back on both iTunes and on Spotify, despite Back to Back being the song that went for rhythmic and urban ads on radio. So here we might have a situation where, unfortunately, you have two songs on the charts, and maybe neither of them will go top 10. However, Hotline Bling is looking very promising. It's been going up on Spotify consistently, reached a new peak just a few days ago at number 5, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it go top 3 in the future. Now, does that mean I think it'll go top 10? Not necessarily. It could definitely peak. I mean, actually, I think one of the likeliest possibilities for this song is the dreaded number 11, but I think it definitely could go top 10. I'm optimistic. I think a 50 or 60% chance is actually, viable. I think that's something that is reasonable to say.
Yeah, I just looking at things as we have them. Like, I know we don't have a video, but I mean, he is a streaming artist, so whatever he drops, it will get streamed, a lot. I just want to make sure that if he does release a video, I'll say yes, top 10. If not, yeah, I mean, he's gonna sell it. He's gonna need to get somewhere in the top 10 on iTunes to actually have that chance and to actually get backed up by radio. I mean, as we talked about actually in the last podcast, where his singles just get picked up, without any push from his label. It's just, they'll probably play back to back until it goes to its peak, and then looking at its iTunes performance, they'll probably go with Hotline Bling. So this could be a radio hit sometime in the fall without his approval or not, because urban radio and rhythmic radio will play whatever the hell they want to. So as long as it's Drake, because Drake is radio candy for urban and rhythmic. So
right, he's the king. He's the king of urban radio.
He is definitely undisputed.
So that concludes this podcast's edition of Will It Go Top 10, of course. If you've got a song that you'd like to see us cover next episode, make sure to tweet it to me at the @Charts Podcast Twitter account, or post it in the thread. That could use a little bit more activity. So that's that. And now we've gotten to our next segment, which is, well, why are EDM songs airplay fueled? You look at the latest single from Calvin Harris, How Deep Is Your Love, number 51 on iTunes, and getting these really good updates on pop radio. And obviously this has been a trend that has followed in recent weeks. Obviously Zed's latest song, Beautiful, now is 14 on radio and 88 on iTunes, even with a discount. And this trend has held for years. So, why is it that EDM songs tend not to sell in huge amounts in the US?
Well, this is a very interesting question. And I think we touched on this. I've seen people post about this in threads and in other forums, but truth be told, most dance music we hear, or EDM type songs we hear on the radio, I think a lot of people just want to have it for the moment, or just want to be engulfed in it, or be within the song just for the moment. It's not something that they're going to want to play repeatedly from time to time. So that's why most of these EDM songs do way better on Spotify, because people can just go listen to it and be done with it, versus spending $1.29 on a song and having to play it over and over again. I think that's maybe one of the theories why people tend to stream EDM versus buy it, because they don't want to, there's not something they're going to be invested in for weeks to come. I mean, we've seen exceptions. Wake Me Up by Avicii, huge radio hit, huge streaming hit, and it was a huge, digital hit in its own right here in the States, selling almost 4.5 million copies at the time. And that was around the time where, we had Katy Perry and Gaga releasing Roaring Applause, and it competed with those singles, but still was able to sell a huge amount of copies. So that is definitely an exception. And obviously We Found Love by Rihanna, which was EDM fueled, but I think her name pretty much sold the song, because if you look at his follow-up singles like Feel So Close and Let's Go and his other follow-up singles, they didn't sell as well as obviously as as We Found Love did. So I think going back to that, I think it's just EDM is just one of those genres that people don't really invest in. And if you take that to the album side, you don't see a lot of EDM albums selling as well either. Like, you may see a general spike in the first week because of the fan base, but EDM albums don't do well on the albums chart either. So you kind of can argue and say, yes, if they're not doing well on the singles chart, they're definitely probably not going to do well on the album side either. So I think they're just more of streaming than than sales. And then if you have a huge name attached to it, like Justin Bieber, which Where Are You Now is doing okay in sales considering the sales climate, then it'll sell well because you have that star power attached to it. But if it's just a Zed featuring a brand new artist, it's not going to sell well. And I believe, I'm just going to say one more thing, but I believe the previous single he had with Selena Gomez, that did better, way better than the single that he has out now, because Selena was attached to the single. And now you have Beautiful Now featuring John somebody. 88 on iTunes with a discount. That is tragic. That's very, very tragic. Let's just keep the discount just so that it stays there, because if they take it away, yeah, it's gonna tumble.
And it wasn't even like, I Want You to Know wasn't even a big hit. That wasn't even a big hit. It barely went top 20 and for like 1 week, I think.
Yep.
So these songs are like the ones that you jam to in the car or at the mall, and then don't end up like actually purchasing. It really doesn't help that digital sales are in serious decline, because they are, and it really is not good for EDM songs at all. Now, these latest songs by Zed and Calvin Harris are not even streaming well. How Deep Is Your Love? Sure, top 50 on Spotify, but US compared to worldwide is very unimpressive. Out of all the songs in the US top 50 and the worldwide top 50, out of all the songs that are on both those charts, How Deep Is Your Love has the least percentage of streams coming from the US, only 17%. And it's hanging around in the 30s on that chart, versus number 2 or 3 worldwide. And Beautiful Now, of course, has never made an appearance in the Spotify top 50, and I Want You to Know was in the 20s. I think it peaked somewhere in the low 20s on Spotify. So these songs have not even been strong streamers. They've only been strong in airplay. The last EDM hit that I can think of that was a strong streamer and a strong radio hit and a decent seller, doesn't have to be a strong seller, just a decent seller, I would argue that was Summer by Calvin Harris, or if you want to count it, Break Free by Ariana featuring Zed. Now, I think that EDM is kind of receded from its mainstream status that it had in 2011 and 2012, and it's less prevalent in the mainstream. That doesn't help, of course, either. So with taking that into consideration, do you think that Calvin Harris will have another Summer, or that Avicii will have another Wake Me Up, or that Zed will have another Clarity?
Well, now that you put it like that, I think what they have to do now is not necessarily change their sound completely, but they need to give something different to the GP. I mean, we touched on this a lot in the last podcast and in previous podcasts. This is why songs such as Cheyenne and Good Thing maybe didn't become hits, is because that sound just kind of wore off from the GP. And with artists or these dance artists or dance DJs such as Zed, Calvin Harris, they kind of stick in their lanes. When I say that, they don't really change their sound. Like if you hear We Found Love from Rihanna, he's reiterated and made so many derivatives of that since 2011. With Zed, he kind of has a signature sound as well, and I think people are probably getting tired of that. With David Guetta, I think he kind of makes his discography a little diverse. Like you have your Titaniums, you have your Hey Mamas, you have your Dangerouses, your Under the Suns. Like his stuff at least incorporates some type of element of difference with his songs, and they tend to do well on Spotify and okay on digital sales. But with the Zeds and the Calvin Harrises, I think they kind of need to tap into something different and maybe pull a David Guetta and incorporate samples into their songs, or just try something different, and maybe that will help them. But I didn't know that they were doing less than well on Spotify. I just assumed they were doing well because they've always streamed decently on there, but wow, that's news. So maybe they do need to change up a little bit with their sounds.
Well, that about wraps it up for today's podcast. Of course, if you have any questions or ideas for segments that you'd like us to do on the next podcast, episode 5, make sure to tweet them to @ChartsPodcast. I run the account. I'll check it frequently. Or post them in the thread. As many questions as you want. We always love new ideas. We always love new questions to answer. So hopefully we'll be able to get everyone on for episode 5. But until then, take care.
All right, thanks for joining in.